They always told us this. The British Empire was built with ships, grew with soldiers, and got rich through colonies. But the real engine was much quieter. Not with the sound of cannons. Not with uniforms. Not even with ports. The real power was behind marble facades, at heavy tables, in signatures made with pens. In other words, finance. Britain didn't conquer the world with rifles alone. It conquered with credit. Bankers in London turned war, trade, and even famine into financial instruments. And if you want to understand Britain's global dominance, you should look less at soldiers and more at accountants. This is the story of how money and power fused into one. And it still shapes the world we live in today, far more than you might think. But let's go back to the beginning. In the 17th century, England was not the vast empire we imagine today. On the contrary, it was weak. Spain and Portugal ruled the oceans. France was rising. The Netherlands controlled global trade, with its navy and advanced financial system. England, on the other hand, was constantly short of money. Wars had emptied the treasury. Kings borrowed, and then didn't pay back. No one trusted the English state. And without trust, there is no credit. Without credit, you can't build an army. You can't build a navy. You can't project power abroad. But in 1694, something happened. Parliament founded the Bank of England. At first glance, the idea was simple. Wealthy investors would lend to the state, and the state would pay them interest. A central bank would manage these debts. But this wasn't just a technical reform. It was a revolution. For the first time, state debt was institutionalized. The unreliable promises of kings were turned into tradable securities. Now the English state could borrow large sums, at low interest, in a regular and predictable way. This was the empire's hidden weapon. Wars were no longer won only with soldiers, but with bonds. While rivals drowned in debt, Britain could keep turning to investors in London and raise money again and again. Wars stopped being purely military struggles and became financial competitions. And Britain had figured out this game. Think about the War of the Spanish Succession in the early 18th century. Britain, despite being a small island nation, sustained armies across Europe for over a decade and kept fleets at sea. How? Not because it was richer, but because it borrowed better. France kept defaulting. Investors were afraid. Interest rates rose. Britain, by contrast, inspired confidence. Taxes, trade revenues, and customs duties guaranteed debt repayment. Investors felt safe. So Britain borrowed more, and because of that, it could keep fighting longer. As this system grew, it grew bigger. By the 1750s, during the 7 Years' War, Britain was borrowing sums that would be unimaginable in today's money. Wars were financed from North America to India. France was crushed under the burden. It fell into a debt crisis. That crisis paved the way for the French Revolution. Britain, meanwhile, won. And it achieved something else as well. At home, it created a powerful class of investors who earned interest from the state. War was no longer just a duty to the nation. It was also a profitable investment. But the system didn't end with war. Trade was the other pillar. And this is where the East India Company enters the stage. This was not an ordinary company. It was half company. Half state, half army. Investors in London bought shares. They expected profits. But those profits were extracted through armies, bribery, and taxation. The company built its own armies in India. It controlled local rulers. It collected taxes from millions of people. And that money flowed back to London. Thus the cycle was completed. Debt, war, victory, trade, taxes, repayment of debt, more debt. The real empire was this cycle itself. By the 19th century, this system had reached its peak. The Napoleonic Wars lasted more than 20 years. France was powerful, but financially fragile. Britain kept borrowing non-stop. In total, more than £600 million. Interest payments consumed half the budget. And yet investors kept lending. Because they trusted the system. And they were right to do so. Britain defeated Napoleon not only on the battlefield, but also in finance. But there is a dark side to this story. Who paid the price for all this debt? The people. Through taxes on tea, sugar, and tobacco. Everyday life became more expensive. But bondholders still received their interest. Money and power were no longer separate. They became the same thing. The empire was now ruled not only by soldiers, but by accounting ledgers. The Opium Wars in China show this clearly. Britain bought tea from China, but lost silver in return. So what was the solution? Opium. Opium produced in India was sold to China. Money flowed to London. When China tried to stop it, the navy arrived. The result? Open ports, forced treaties, financial dependency. And once again, London won. By the mid-19th century, Britain was not just the workshop of the world, but its banker. Railways, mines, plantations. All financed with British capital. The pound sterling was global money. The gold standard inspired confidence. But this confidence was not good for everyone. Investors won. Colonies lost. India paid taxes, supplied raw materials, but suffered famines. The financial system was efficient, but ruthless. And now the real question. Is this story really over? Today, wars financed by debt, funds that profit from crises, bondholders who don't suffer from bubbles. Do you think we've left this system behind? Or are we still inside it? History whispers the answer. Financial literacy is not a luxury. It is a survival tool. Because whoever controls money also writes history. If this perspective opened a new window for you, subscribe. History gives answers, if you know where to look.